As you can tell, I'm a bit under the weather today, but I'll try and get through this as best possible. Psalm 78, the history of Judah, continues from verse 59 to 71, and then it reflects back on the anointing of David in verse 72. Reading from Psalm 78, 68 through 71, he chose instead the tribe of Judah, Mount Zion, which he loved. He built his sanctuary like the heights, like the earth that he established forever. He chose David, his servant, and took him from the sheepfolds. He brought him from tending ewes to being a shepherd over his people, Jacob, over Israel, his inheritance. We read in 1 Samuel 16:11, where Samuel asked Jesse, "Are these all the sons you have?" "There is still the youngest," he said, "but right now he's tending the sheep." Samuel told Jesse, "Send for him. We won't sit down to eat until he gets here." So Jesse sent for him, and he had beautiful eyes and a healthy, handsome appearance. Then the Lord said, "Anoint him, for he is the one." So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord took control of David from that day forward. Then Samuel set out and went on to Ramah. Have you ever wondered how much patience it must take to be an open-range shepherd overseeing a flock of sheep? I would take it that God was training David long before Samuel ever anointed him as king, as the new king apparent of Israel. As a shepherd boy, David would have learned to care for and keep a watchful eye on the newborn lambs, following the movements of the sheep as they wandered over the open areas in search of provision. David would have learned gentleness, patience, and a sense of protectiveness as he watched over his father's flock. These acquired traits and characteristics certainly aided him in becoming a God-honoring king. As I have taught so often in the past, the number 8 seems to have a biblical and symbolic application to new beginnings. David was no exception. He was the 8th son of Jesse. God was done with the apathetic humanistic reign of Saul, and through David he set forth a new beginning of nation building. Verse 72 of 78 reads, So he shepherded them according to the integrity of his heart and guided them with skillful hands. We read in the previous passage in verse 13:1 of 1 Samuel, after Samuel had anointed David, the Spirit of the Lord took control of David from that day forward. Despite some fleshly setbacks, David walked upright before Israel as a superior king, where he shepherded Israel according to the integrity of his heart, guiding them with skillful hands. David was a sagacious ruler, and under his reign, the Jewish kingdom rose to a respectable position among the pagan nations. In this psalm, we have followed the roller coaster of Israel's exodus and the wilderness wandering, its establishment in the promised land through the reign of judges and usurped monarchy, only to arrive at this final stanza where the psalmist had intended all along. Perhaps Israel's rebellion, lack of faith, wilderness wanderings, and an irritable petulance is a path similar to the one that, as God's adopted, we also trod. And just like remnant Israel, we can be grateful that we serve a God of endless compassion and of great mercy, willing to forgive and not willing for any to perish. David only physically lived in Israel for 40 years, from 1010 to 9, or only reigned in Israel from 1010 to 970. Nevertheless, God, who is a promise keeper, promised that his family's dynasty was established forever. The Palestinians as a group wasn't even invented until 1969 AD, almost 3,000 years after David's death. Before that, they were just called Arabs, who conquered the area and migrated from the greater nation of Syria. When 20th century Israel was reestablished in 1948, the population in the land was 872,700 people, of which 82% were Jewish. Jewish people numbered 716,700, while Christians and Arabs together made up only 156,000. Historically speaking, in 135 AD, the Greek Syria Palestinia was used in naming a new Roman province from the merger of Roman Syria and Roman Judea. The only people referred to historically as Palestinians were Jews, and although Israel is often called Palestine, it was a derogatory term used by her enemies from the past. There was never a Palestine, and there was no such thing as Palestinian people until the conflicts of our modern day and age. Biblically speaking, does this answer a question as to who has the occupation rights to the land of Israel?